What is going on? Welcome back to Shed Built. In this episode, we're working on the coils. Alright, before we get into our scheduled viewing, I have something exciting I want to show you. Look at what we have here. Now I just want to start by saying a massive thank you to Superior Engineering for helping out with the build. It's really a company that doesn't need much of an introduction, so if you know, you know, but you know that they are the business. So what we have here, I won't go into all of it because it's a lot to unpack, but you can kind of see what we've got going on. It's basically everything that you need to lift your GU Patrol, I was about to say troop carrier, your GU Patrol 4 inches over factory height, including the all-important Superflex arms. These are just insane looking. They have a lot of weight to them, and if you know anything about quality, you know weight means quality. But serious, everything that we need is here, and it is beautiful stuff, and I'm so excited to get this bolted in and under the Troopy. So first thing I'm going to start doing is attaching the steering using the panhard and solid drag links to the front diffs, and then we can slide that under there because it'll stop the wheels from turning either side and flopping around on us. So bolt those on, slide it under, and then we can start taking lots of detailed measurements. Alright, today is the day that I start stripping down this front end. So I'm going to be removing the wheel bar, everything off both fenders, because I want to get access to the chassis rails down here. So I'm probably going to skip through most of me tearing down this front end because it's a bit boring, but once I get it all stripped, then we'll come back and see what we have to tackle next. Look at this thing. Alright, so I've now got the front end torn down enough to have good access to the chassis down here. So first step is jack up your car, support it with jack stands, and then we can start removing everything front axle related, unbolt it all, get this out of here, and then get the Patrol in. Alright, so as you saw, we've just removed the factory diff and the leaf springs, and what I've also done is rolled out the Patrol diff. So what I've got set up here is a little line laser, and I'm going to measure the total width of the diff, divide that in half, find the center point, and project that center point onto the diff housing, mark that, so that way when we slide it underneath the Troopy, we can measure the chassis, do the same, find the center, project a line, and then just line up the two lines with the laser, so that way we find the center where the diff needs to sit. Alright, we're making pretty good progress. We've got the axle under there. We've centered it using our laser level with the two marks there. Doesn't look level, but yeah, it is. Straight down there, so we know that the axle is centered within the chassis. Now what I've been doing is I just chucked this, well, before we get into that, look at this, look at the poke. Some of you may be thinking that is insane. but I'm actually really excited for that. It's going to be a lot more stable on the road, maybe stop it from tipping around a bit. But I've just thrown a tyre and wheel on there. This isn't the tyres and wheels I'm going to run, but the same size and the rims are the same offset. So well, I could even go smaller offset and push it back into the guard bit to stop that wheel poke, but I don't think it's too bad. Anyway, put it on there to center it up inside the wheel well, and I've also thrown the fender on obviously to center it up inside of there. Now I can put the center of the tyre anywhere I want within here because all the mounts have to be custom made anyway, so I can determine where I want this to land inside the wheel well. And looking back at previous photos of side shots of Troopies and actually other HJ75s, the tyre seems to be really far back. Maybe it has something to do with the leafs, and when you lift them, pushes the tyre back a bit. So I've stretched it forward a little bit and then centered it up within the guard. So if I can get a shot of this, it's a lot more central now. You can see that there, and obviously when the tyre comes up, it will tuck nicely inside that fender instead of wanting to push back up and to the left there. So I've just done this side. I'm going to take lots of measurements from the diff to the chassis and then mirror it over on the passenger side, and then we can start looking at the coil hats. Before I move forward, I thought I'd better just get another reference measure point from the chassis just to make sure everything's centered, and I'm glad I did. So I transferred my center line onto the ground, and you can see that all the 3 lines aren't completely centered. So what I did was just transfer them down to the ground, and I did the same on the rear. Measured the chassis, found the center point of the chassis, marked that on the ground. You can see the laser level down there, projecting the line between my 2 reference marks. So what I'm going to do now is just run a chalk line between the 2 from this line down to the end, and then we have a perfect center point and reference point for the front and the rear conversion. So I'll run this line out, line up the 3 marks, and then we can push forward. So you just saw me make up this little contraption, and what that's for is because now that we've got it centered to the diff, we also need to get it centered this way within the wheel well. So I needed a reliable, repeatable reference mark. So I made this thing up that bolts into the sway bar mounts on either side. So that way I can adjust either side the exact same. Now I can just lay this across here, take my measurement that way, and then also along here down to the base. Take a measurement there, and we've now got it centered in all which ways. So now I can start working on the coil towers, and they need a bit of finesse to get them in there fitting nicely. So I'll show you where I'm at on those. Alright, so here we're looking at the driver's side coil tower, and if you have a look down there, you can see it has a pretty, once had a pretty major dip in it to suit the patrol chassis. So what I've done is just cut a relief cut through there, bent it up to fit the Troopy, and then I'll cut this excess off and weld that back together. Also down here, the Patrol had a much larger curve in the chassis, which this support sat in here like this. So I've cut that down to size. Now, and using some more 25 by 5mm plate, I'm just going to recreate this structure down here to support the underneath of the chassis. So I'm going to get this lined up on the Troopy chassis now, exactly where I want it, parallel with the diff, and then I can start creating that bottom support down there and get this welded onto the chassis. And we can stick some coils under it, some shocks under it, boom. Alright, so we just welded up those relief cuts for the driver's side coil tower, and now what I've done using that 5 by 20 mil plate, I've just bent up some new supports to replace the old ones that we cut off because they were too long. So these went in there like that, and what I've done is just mimicked this structure using these plates. So that'll go on there like that, get a nice tight fit all the way around, and then that will get welded onto this bottom support bar like that, and then that will complete the factory structure. Alright, so some time has passed since we last spoke, but I'll quickly give you guys a quick rundown and get you up to speed to where we're at. Alright, so looking at the driver's side now, you can see that this steering box is not the HJ75 steering box that we rebuilt a couple of months ago. This is the GU Patrol steering box. It's definitely a lot stronger. I'll show you here the side by side, and you can see that the box is a lot bigger, and for running the tyres and the setup that I'm running, everyone has recommended that I run the GU box. So original plan was to use the Patrol pitman arm on the factory steering box, but I've gone away from that now, and being that we're trying to mimic the entire setup to be under Patrol, we want the suspension to think that it's still under a Patrol. This is definitely the way to go. So I've cut off the panhard rod mount just to use it for mock-up, and you can see down there that that's actually the factory bolt hole for this steering box, so we know that these two are where they want to be. I'm not going to use this mount, so what I'm going to do now is just make up a new mount from here to the chassis at the same dimensions. You can see down there, because the Patrol has such a larger curve in it and the Land Cruiser's a lot flatter, there's massive gaps and stuff all around it, it definitely doesn't fit. But the panhard rod that I just cut up and welded, which you just saw, does now fit up once I get my adjustable panhard from Superior, and that should be able to just adjust straight in there. Got our coil buckets all sorted out, passenger and driver. So on the passenger, you can see we just repeated what we've done over on the driver. Got nice tight gaps in there all the way around, and everything's lining up beautifully. So the reason I got this in here is because I really wanted to have a play around with where everything's going to line up, because I don't want this thing crab walking or bump steering all over the place. So you can see down here, we want our steering arm to basically cut straight through our panhard rod, which is down here. If you can see that, that's our panhard mount, and it's basically cutting through the bolt hole for the panhard. So that should minimize a lot of bump steer, and they are as parallel as possible. So that's exactly what you want. I don't know if I can get a better shot of it through here, but you can see they're quite parallel through there, and that's exactly what we want. So I really took my time getting these aligned perfectly. So now I'm going to make up this mount, weld that on, and then we can start moving forward. Alright, so there's been a slight change of plans. Seeing that no one in Perth wants to sell me a bit of RHS that long, I've had to go back to using the original mount, which in the end probably isn't a bad idea anyway, because the angles are all the same and it's braced a million times already. So you can see here I've just capped the ends and also extended this one to get a bit more surface area onto that mount that we just made. I've done the same on the other side, but you can see in here it's pretty rusty, and there's no real good way to remove all of that except using electrolysis, which you've seen me use in the past. But the guys over at KBS Coatings Australia have sent me through a brand new product called Rust Blast Powder. Now yours, if you were to order some of this, it will come in a different package. This is just a test sample for me to use and see how it goes and bring you guys along with me. I don't know what's going to happen. I've never used it. I've never even seen it being used, being a new product. But what I've heard from the guys, it is damn good. So down in here, I don't know if this piece has been painted previously, so I don't know how it's going to go with the paint, but I'll bring you guys along with me and we'll see what happens together. I'm going to clean it up using the Aqua Clean, again from KBS, using a scouring pad. And then what I've got here is just some hot water in a little container. Going to add the Rust Blast, 1 part Rust Blast and 19 parts water. Submerge it in there, and then we'll check back in an hour or so and see what happens, see if it needs to sit longer, or I don't know, see what happens. Alright, it's been about an hour. Just pop the lid. Let's get in here and take a look. Ooh, yeah. It's definitely doing its job with the flashlight. Yeah, it's stripped a lot of that rust out. You can see it's exposed a lot of the paint, which I assumed was under there. But it's definitely doing something. Hell of a lot cleaner than it was. Stripped out a lot of it. Still want to get rid of a lot of this surface orange rust here on the top. So I'm going to leave it. Might leave it overnight, come back in the morning, see what happens. I want to see what this stuff can do. So I'll leave this in here overnight. The water's still warm, which is good. So it's still doing something. So we'll pop back in tomorrow morning, see what happens. All right, so it's the next day, about lunchtime. Let's have a look. Oh, yeah. Stripped majority of that rust. There's still a fair bit on there. I'm pretty happy with that. I'll hit that with a wire wheel. Remove some of that paint in there. Might throw some paint stripper on that. Yeah, pretty happy. For literally just cleaning it and dunking it in a bit of water with some solution. I'd say the Rust Blast powder is pretty good. So I'm gonna go hose this off. We'll clean it up a bit, try to get rid of some of that paint, and then we can weld it on to the other mount. Alright, just real quick, I just blasted that off with the garden hose. And you can see it's actually done a really good job. There's still some larger bits of rust all around here, the real deep stuff. Oh, it's actually coming off a bit now. But yeah, just the rust from before must have just been sitting on the surface. So it's actually done a really, really good job. Pretty happy with that. And let's go. Alright, so we've now got our panhard mount welded to our chassis mount, I guess you could call it. And you can see our quick maths has worked out quite well. Everything's still intersecting quite nicely, and we are parallel between the steering arm and the panhard still. I had to cut off 20 mil from the adjuster and from the thread, which was scary, but manned up and just got into it. So that's all looking pretty nice now. We've still got heaps of adjustment there. What I've also done over here is just test fit the box using the factory bolt holes. So now all I have to do is weld up the panhard seam, weld the panhard onto the chassis, but all of that is going to have to wait until next time. Alright, and that is it for another episode. Again, I just want to give a massive thank you to Superior Engineering, especially Sam over there for all his hard work. It's been a massive help to the build and for the channel. Now, I know you guys want to see more frequent uploads, so from here on out, I will try to get episodes uploaded more frequently. Obviously, they'll be shorter, but at least you have something to watch, I guess. Until then, stick around for next week when we get stuck into the coils again, getting all those mounts welded onto the chassis and finalising some of the bits up on the front end. Like, subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel grow and for us to be able to do more of the things that we've been doing. I really do appreciate it. So with that said, I'll see you next time. Cheers for watching.